Welcome to Cultivated Live for Tuesday, September 10th. My name is Jay Rosenthal. I'm the co-founder of Cultivated Media, the host of this program called Cultivated Live. And since we launched, our goal at Cultivated has been to be cannabis industry first, providing you with the most important, insightful, useful, and timely information every single day. We do that through our daily newsletter, which is called Cultivated Daily. We do that through this daily live stream, which is Cultivated Live. We would love if you followed us on LinkedIn, subscribe to us on YouTube, but most importantly, get our daily newsletter in your inbox every day. You can find it at cultivated.news. Today is a big day for the future of the U.S., let's say. It's going to be a big day for cannabis, I believe, but we're going to talk to Tyler Beuerlein about it. He is the Chief Strategic Business Development Officer. It's a lot of words right next to each other at Safe Harbor Financial. Tyler, welcome.
Jay, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
I'm glad we could when we chose the time. I think even sometime during the summer that this was going to be the day. Maybe the debate was set, but there's a lot happening in cannabis over the past week. A lot of that has to do the future of cannabis, and I think importantly, sort of for the work that you do, for the future of, let's say, cannabis, banking, finance, like normalization of the actual industry. But before we get to that, give us a brief rundown of like you, but also of Safe Harbor Financial, and then we'll get into it.
Yeah, Tyler Beuerlein, for those of you that don't know me, I've been in the industry for over a decade now, which is
I think there's
crazy
nobody that
to
doesn't know
say.
you. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, but been around for a long time and had the opportunity to join Safe Harbor before we went public on NASDAQ a couple of years ago. Which, watching Safe Harbor build their cannabis banking program from the beginning, everything that Sunday Seafried's done and stands for is a pretty big opportunity, and I'm lucky to be here. So for those, again, that don't know, we bank the industry nationwide. We lend to it nationwide in all state legal markets. And we're, this is what we do. It's all we do. It's where we live. And so happy to help anybody in need.
And thinking about that, that is a long run. You're too old. You're too young to have been in it 10 years, but also you don't seem to have aged as much as people who've been in it for 10 years. But talk about sort of the evolution of the industry and of Safe Harbor really in that sort of time horizon, because a lot has changed. Maybe not as much
Yes.
as some people would have liked, but talk a little about sort of that evolution over the past decade, say, of cannabis in the U.S. as it relates to sort of what you do.
Yeah, on the banking side, I don't think the industry now realizes how bad it was then, right? I mean, we had a scenario where there were very few institutions that were willing to take the risk. Regulators were completely opposed to it. So, if a bank decided to go into it, that conversation with the regulatory body typically didn't go well, and it was typically different even by region. So, if you look at like maybe the FDIC, for example, what they would tell a bank in their West Coast region might be different than what they tell a bank in the East Coast region. So there was this huge conundrum, for years. And I remember back in the day, Jay, I mean, no exaggeration, I probably got at least 30 phone calls a week from people that just needed a bank account and they were willing to do anything and pay anything to get it. And as the years have come and gone, regulators have built what I would call their own internal policies and procedures. They all have institutions banking this at scale, even. And we've gotten to a point now, fast forward 10 years later, the banking environment for cannabis has gotten so hyper competitive, especially with interest rates being where they are and the need for liquidity and deposits. It's gotten so competitive that I think this is going to be the first year where we see institutions actually get out of the business because they just can't compete. So I think we're going to see fewer institutions after the end of this year than we had going in, which is, something I never thought I'd see.
Right. But something you said right at the beginning there was that people who are in the industry now don't know how bad it was then, but they don't
No
think it's
idea.
great. But they don't think it's great now because many people are coming from, let's say, more traditional industries. And
Sure.
it came up in a conversation yesterday as well that we had on the show, which was people who are new to the industry don't quite get it yet because there are these nuances to the sector that are interesting. But the folks that have been in the industry for 10 years and are still in the industry have gone through thick and thin and thin and thin and are now poised for what I think is going to be sort of generational change of the like. I think rescheduling will be something, the most important policy over the past 50 years that may be on the cusp of changing. That I think would open the door to safe banking potentially and hopefully soon. And this week alone, we've had a movement, certainly from a Republican presidential candidate, on rescheduling, on safe banking, on ballot measure in Florida, Amendment 3. It seems like maybe decades of progress have happened over the past week itself. Like, how are you thinking about that at Safe Harbor, and maybe even having just been in it 10 years? Like, it seems like a lot has happened over the past 10 days, never mind 10 years.
Yeah, it's refreshing. And it's refreshing to see both parties go at this. In regards to safe banking, we've been at this. People don't realize, I don't think, I believe safe banking was originally introduced 10 years ago.
I
And we've
believe
had
that.
now, what, 7 or 8 iterations of it. It's going to pass this year, right? And the last time was 2 years ago. And we had a Democrat-controlled House and Senate at the time, and somebody in the presidential seat, and everybody thought, man, this is it. Every CEO came out and said, "Oh, we're going. This is going to happen." And then I will never forget this, Jay. I literally laughed out loud when I saw it. I remember when it got shot down, and the reason it got shot down was because Mitch McConnell shot it down. And I laughed out loud because he's been there since 1985. So it's kind of the old adage: fool me once, shame on you; fool me twice, shame on me; fool me 7, 8 times,
Right.
let's start over, right?
Yeah.
And what's happened during that time is, again, the private sector has essentially solved the issue. Now there are some gaps. Lending's not where it needs to be. The payment networks are still not in the industry, but it remains to be seen whether or not SAFE has any impact on those at this point. The thing that SAFE would have an impact on, I believe, is access to public markets. And if that's the only thing that comes out of SAFE that's beneficial, then great. But I don't think it's going to have much impact on the banking sector at this point, even if it does pass.
Because all the players, if you will, that are in will stay in, and it'll be slow to get maybe those, I don't know, big financial institutions in the game anyway, right? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, I mean, Jay, if you think about it, you've got multiple regional banks over 50 billion in assets in the business. You've got a bank that's over 200 billion in assets in the business. This will remain a highly regulated industry, even upon federal legality. And if you look at perfectly legal industries outside of cannabis that are highly regulated and pose significant compliance risk to a bank or credit union, they won't touch them. I mean, I get as many phone calls from those type of industries as I do cannabis now, and people just don't realize that. And so I think that, and I'm seeing new institutions come in, for whatever reason, they're presented these pro formas on how many deposits they're going to get and the revenue they're going to generate and all these things. And when they get to the reality of it, operators are holding their deposits hostage for lending or for the products that they really need, and they can't build a business, and they fade out after 3 or 6 months at this point. So, I'm supportive of it. I hope it does pass because I think it's great for the industry. But I think we all need to keep a realistic perspective of this. And the other thing, maybe the most important thing, it's highly likely that the branded card networks do not come in, even if SAFE passes, which that's one of the biggest problems I think we face as an industry right now is just access to traditional payment methods, and we're seeing the fallout of that, industry wide, even this last weekend. So
Yeah.
those are all things that need to be addressed.
And as I was saying, I'm American and from Boston, but I live in Toronto. And even though it's been legal here 5 years, like not every bank banks it. The banks that do take it charge an arm and a leg on a monthly basis to have the accounts. Like it is exactly what you just described, but in a fully legal market, right? It's not everybody's in it.
Sure.
Access to capital can be hard. Yes, banking normalization, and they do take credit cards, but it's not as like what didn't happen on one day, right? There is an evolution and it takes
No,
time. And even when you get there, it may not be exactly what you thought it would be.
exactly. And I think the industry just needs to keep that in perspective,
Yeah.
because there's so much misinformation out there related to these things.
Yeah. And so I think I teased it at the beginning. Like tonight is a presidential debate. Over the past week, Certainly, Donald Trump has talked about cannabis a number of times, both in interviews and on Truth Social, at least twice. Kamala Harris has not said as much except to put out a statement from a sort of press liaison. But I expect, like, tonight is the maybe one and only debate of the presidential race. I think it's going to come up in the debate. I have my my VCR. It's not a VCR, but my VCR ready to record that segment of the debate. That's how
I would
old
be
I am.
thoroughly impressed if it was a VCR.
That would be amazing if I had a VCR. Like how backwards would yeah, on my Sony Trinitron TV that weighs 400 pounds. No,
That'd be great.
But like it seems like, I mean, I want to put yourself back 10 years in your mind, right? On the presidential stage, both candidates seemingly the gap between them on this issue has narrowed considerably over the past week. Like, won't it be something if they talk about it tonight, both in a positive light?
I think it's imminent, right? I think just the fact that they've both been public about it, in the way that they have, is really compelling. It's phenomenal for the industry, and I think it just reiterates the fact that there was a lot of talk about, well, if Trump gets in, is Schedule 3 not going to happen? And I think this ship has sailed. The cat's out of the bag. And I think the driver for a lot of these things, Jay, and I don't know if you would agree with this, but I've seen this endlessly over the years. The tax revenues that are being generated by this industry at this point are too big to ignore, right? And I've seen it in the context of every restrictive medical market that's launched over the years, and eventually, a year in, they start getting that tax revenue, and suddenly there's an adult use initiative, or they launch a medical market and the neighboring state launches adult use, and the state goes, we don't want to lose that tax revenue, and so let's hurry up and get it approved. And it shouldn't be that way, but that's the way that our world is working these days. So I think it's very interesting. I think it's phenomenal for everybody. I mean, it's very exciting. I'm pumped to see it.
I'm pumped to see it as well, and hopefully on the stage tonight. But that scenario you just described, I think, would adequately describe where Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, New Hampshire are right now, where they're soon to be surrounded by legal states, and they see tax dollars flowing out. We talked to a state legislator in New Hampshire who said there's a conga line every day of people going to buy cannabis in surrounding states, and I think that's a good description, because in states that are contiguous, like, people can go from one state to the other to buy cannabis. And Pennsylvania, like, people must be fleeing every day and then coming back to buy legal cannabis in surrounding states: Ohio, New York, New Jersey, Maryland.
Well, look at the border dispensary volumes in those areas. I mean, it's very telling.
Yeah, the ones that are like super nervous right now are the border ones on Michigan and Ohio. Now that Ohio's legal, the Michigan's one that are doing Boku business are like we got to keep that business.
What do we do now?
Yeah, it wasn't as great as it was at the beginning of the summer. And like, I guess when those new markets open up, what does that mean for Safe Harbor? Like, is it like a bonanza? Let's go try people to bank with us. Like, what does that look like?
I think for us, it's I think that, Jay, there's a lot of education that goes into it, right? Because I think with every new market, every bad actor in this industry sprints, right? And they try and push the same things they've been pushing for 5-10 years, however long they've been around. And so there's an education component, but yeah, I mean, we're trying to expand pretty rapidly, and every new market is a huge opportunity for us. I just spoke at an event in Minnesota last week. It's really exciting to see what's happening there. Really good people, and that's taking shape. New Jersey and New York, and we're positioned to uniquely serve those markets. And we're also positioned to, because we serve every market, to consolidate relationships into one. So as you probably know, many of these operators have 5, 10, 15 banking relationships. And so we're really trying to bring everybody in-house, really ease the pain of the fee structures that are out there, very antiquated, very expensive. And we're trying to really get ahead of all that and provide a true one-stop solution for everybody.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense. And I think you were saying every bad actor sort of sprints there. At the same time, every new market doesn't know what the previous market learned, like the hard way, right? So maybe the learning curve is shorter, but there is still a learning curve for Minnesota, for Ohio, for soon to be Pennsylvania, New York, New Hampshire. Like, these things take time to learn. You hope it takes less time to learn in Ohio than it did in California, but there is still time to learn.
Yeah, and I think with new markets, you also have a sense of stubbornness, right? Where people say, "Oh, I came from this industry, I know what I'm doing," and you try and sit with them and be like, "Hey, I get that, and I totally respect that, but this is very different, and sooner or later, you're going to learn the hard way." And so, if we can help, so you get some of that too, but it's always interesting.
Yeah, and it's always interesting. And what is it? History rhymes, right? Like the history, like the like how Minnesota goes. I mean, Minnesota may be actually pretty unique because of the sort of
Yeah,
THC beverage world, but every market also thinks they are unique in this
yeah.
approach, but they're pretty similar. They run into similar roadblocks. Um, Opening stores is usually a challenge. Local municipalities often say no until they say yes. Like there is this cycle that keeps repeating itself. But I guess that lends itself to saying like, oh, Safe Harbor Financial, they've been through this dozens, hundreds, thousands of times. They've seen it.
Yeah, and we try and help. I mean, I've been an open book my entire career. I've tried to help everybody I possibly can, and so when people call us for help, we're going to help them. Even if we're not the answer for their need, we're going to help them. And so I would just kind of extend that olive branch to anybody in the industry. If you have a question, if you're seeing something, if you're going through something at the government level, we've probably experienced something or seen it, and we're more than happy to help. So
Yeah.
don't hesitate.
Well, Tyler, with that, I want to thank you for making time this morning. Enjoy the debate tonight. If you need a copy, I'll be handing out VHS, actually betas all
Yeah,
afternoon, all
yeah.
day tomorrow
I
if you
want
want.
I want a live feed of your recorder. That'd be great.
I could never
And your
figure out how to do
giant
that anyway.
TV.
So believe me, there is a
Yeah,
VCR in my parents' garage, but it's not. I don't even know how you'd hook it up to like a real TV anymore.
Jay, I think it's in your garage, and you just don't want to admit it. It's
That's
okay.
true. Don't tell anybody. Tyler, I appreciate
Yeah,
your time this
sorry.
morning for joining us. We'll see you hopefully soon. Probably, I don't know, or in Las Vegas or around some other town, some other convention,
Yeah,
some other meeting. Thank you for your time today. And for those following at home tomorrow, we'll be back with Jeremy Burke, my co-founder here at Cultivated. He is our editor-in-chief. We will be digesting and looking at the VCR tape from the debate, hopefully where they mentioned cannabis. That's tomorrow, 10 a.m. Eastern, right here on our LinkedIn page, on our YouTube channel. As always, get our newsletter at cultivated.news. And if you're in a legal state, buy cannabis at your local dispensary. It certainly helps them and probably helps Safe Harbor as well with their banking needs. So thanks, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.